Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. This is the second part, which is part 2 of the series on moving your family to Ireland step by step. It's the series on family reunification for healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, carers, everyone. This is what you need to see if you want to move your family into the country as soon as you can. Then we're going to see in details what the supporting documentation entails. Correct documentation so that you can avoid delays as much as possible. On documentation, you need to know that you need to submit your documents in person. You can't send anyone. No one can do that for you. You need to go in person to the nearest Visa Facilitation Services Global Office, which is VFS. I said it in the first part. They have 2 offices in Nigeria. If you're in Nigeria, for example, they have in Abuja, and they have another one in Lagos. So you need to go in person. Firstly, you need to submit your visa application, the one you did online. You need to print that out and bring that in person. Then you need to get your supporting documentation. You need to get the photographs, the fee, and the passport as well. I'm going to be explaining what those means in details. Note that all your documents must be original. All your documents must be legible. All your documents must be verifiable. All your documents could either be in English language or in Irish language, or it should be translated with a certified translation if it's in another language. Then it shouldn't be in envelopes or different folders. You need to arrange everything exactly the way they want you to submit them. Then if you submit a document that is not in English or that is not in Irish, it must be accompanied by a full translation, and I'm going to show you what that implies as well. So each translated document, if you're translating your document, for example, if a certificate was issued in your local language, then you need to translate that. So if you are translating, note that each translated document must contain a confirmation from the translator that it is an accurate translation of the original document, that there was no mistakes in any way. The person must put it in writing as accurate. The date must be written. The translator's full name must be written, and signature is just like you're notarizing a document. And the person notarizing your document needs to confirm that they have seen the original of the document, and they are signing their name, their address, and other details, and they are putting a stamp over that as well. So the translator of your documents mostly it's not applicable if you're in Nigeria or if you're in African country, except if maybe your document was in French, you are from a French speaking country and everything was written in French, for example, then you have to translate that back into English or Irish. I think English is the preferable one anyway. Then you need the translator needs to put his full name and contact details and the signature as well. Don't forget, those things should not be missing on the translated document. Then firstly, what do you need if you are submitting your visa application? Your joint family visa, which is long stay single entry for your family members. Note that if you have kids, each of your kids, they will have their own separate application made, but the documentation could all be the same. You don't need duplicate documents for each kid, but the application form that you're doing, that you're filling online, you need to fill separate ones for your kids as well. They need to get their own separate appointment dates and time as well, so you can book the appointment in sequence so that they follow each other. Now, on documentation, what do you need as a spouse of someone in Ireland, or a critical skills holder, or a general employment permit holder? What you need to know first is you need your signed and dated summary application form and the fee. You're going to pay that fee in person, mostly at visa centers. They use cash payment, they use POS, and they charge extra for courier services and for their administration services as well. So you fill the online visa application form for joint family. You're choosing long stay, you're choosing visa entry. If you have 2 kids and your spouse is coming with those 2 kids, then 3 forms needs to be filled. You print that. When you fill that, you print it out as PDF document, and you need to sign that. electronic signatures are not acceptable. So you need to sign that in person, and then on the application form there is going to be an 8-digit reference number located on the first page. So you need to note that, because even in future, if you want to track your application, that reference number is what you need. So you need to keep that for each person. Make sure you note the reference number on each person's application form. And the next thing, two colored passport sized photographs. I'm going to make that in the next part of this series, the requirements for that, so that you can get it correctly, because there's been issues whereby for joint family visas they had to send the passport photographs, they send them back because they were not in line with standards. So you don't want to miss that as well. You want to get that correctly. Your passport photograph for each person, each person needs two. Each person among your family members coming over to you, they need two photographs. So the photograph shouldn't be more than 6 months old. Your name and the visa application reference number of each person must be printed on the back clearly in bold, must be printed on the back. That you can use a black pen to write that. So the full name and the reference number should be on the back of each passport. Then note that you are not to pin that, you are not to staple that together. Just make sure you understand that. Put them separately. You are not to pin that to the application form. So you should keep it separately in a place. Then your current international passport, you need a full copy of all your previous passports. Note that when submitting this, your supporting documentation, you might need, depending on the visa office you're going to, most times aside originals, they also need two photocopies of each document that you have, two photocopies of each document, because they are sending them to different departments. The department is going to hold the copy, and then another copy is going to go to the embassy, things like that. So you need two additional documents, and a copy for yourself for reference in future, just in case, so that you can know the arrangement of your document and the things you submitted and the things you didn't submit. So for your current international passport, you need that aside, and then you need to photocopy all the pages times 2. You need to photocopy all the pages times 2. And if you have other other passports as well, you need a full copy of all of them. You are producing the original, and at the same time you are also producing the previous passport, the copy of the previous passport, all the pages. Then your current passport must be valid for at least 12 months. So if your passport is about to expire, you don't want to take chances. So you need to renew that before applying for visa. It should be valid for at least 12 months as at the time of applying for visa. Then the next thing you need your signed letter of application letter. So that application is a personal letter that you are writing. For example, you are a spouse living in an African country, and your partner is already in Ireland. You need to write an application letter. Then your spouse needs to write you an invitation letter. Both needs to be submitted. So in part 5 of this series, I'm going to show you how to write those letters correctly, and then with my draft, then you can always use it can be a guide for you to write yours. So you need a signed letter of application yourself. It should include your full contact details. It should outline the reason why you're coming to Ireland, that you are coming to join your wife, you're coming to join your husband who has been resident in the country for as long as possible. You can mention the date. You need to provide the details of the family member in Ireland who is sponsoring your application. Those things need to reflect on the application letter you're writing. Then you need to give details of any other members of the family who are currently in the country as well, or who are in United Kingdom or any European Union as well. Then aside that, you need eligibility to sponsor. You need to know, so you understand who can sponsor you. If your spouse that you're joining, if the person you are joining is actually eligible. I mentioned this in part 1. Peradventure you are just joining me in this part 2, then you need to go back to part 1 so that you can understand what eligibility means. If the person sponsoring you is really eligible to bring you immediately, or to force to wait in that country for like 1 year before they can apply for, or whatever they need to know to do. So you need to understand eligibility to sponsor, then you need to provide a clear and legible copy of all pages of their passport. All pages of their passport. Remember that the person that is sponsoring you is in another country, is in Ireland already, and you're planning to join. So they need all the original, because you need to submit originals and photocopies as well. Everything that they are going to be sending you, all the documents you need, they need to send them by courier. Paid courier services registers tracking services, so that they can track those documents. They send the original by post, because you can't just, maybe your spouse can just send you maybe a scanned passport, for example, and you just print them out and you are saying you want to apply for visa. So that person standing as your sponsor needs to send all originals of those documents that you need, and then eventually when you're coming into the country, you can bring them along with you, or if anything happens, you can always send them back by courier anyway. So no eligibility, you need to provide a clear and legible copy of all pages of their passport, and aside this, you need to get a copy of their certificate of registration. The document, that is the document issued by the Irish immigration authorities. You need to get a copy of their certificate, because when they coming into the country, they have to register for Irish residence permits. So that card, you need the front copy and the back copy as well. So you need to get a copy of that, and if they are working, wherever they are working, you need to get their certificate of practice of registration in the body where they are practicing professionally. You need to get that as well. Then aside this, as if your sponsor is still a non-European citizen, you need a copy of their employment contract, the original copy of their employment contract, and the photocopy as well. Then if it's a researcher, if it's a critical skills holder, or someone with general employment permit, then you still need a copy of the employment contract as well. So it's part of the document that your sponsor is going to send to you for applying for joint family visa. So it's very, very important. You need that. Their certificate of registration where they're practicing, their evidence of stay, which is their Irish residence permit or their GNIB card, and the evidence, and then the evidence of their current employment, which is their contract. You need that as well. Then evidence of claimed relationship. So evidence of claimed relation, for example, you are claiming that you're joining your spouse or maybe a dependent family member, then you need to prove that you are actually the spouse or the child or the partner of that person. Like I was explaining in the part 1 of this series, one could be the spouse, engaged, or officially married, and they are connected through marriage, or one could be the civil partner, and I will give you another explanation on that again, and it could be the direct child as well. So civil partnership is a legal relationship that is entered into by a couple, which is registered, and it provides them with similar legal rights to married couples. Note that civil partnership is not marriage, but it's just to give some people rights as if they are married. For example, it was introduced because of same-sex marriages, because most people maybe out of rejection or so, but the government still wants to give them the right to get to dwell together as couples. So they introduced civil partnership, so they could have civil partnership documents that entitled them to live as husbands and wives. So that is on civil partnership. So you need to understand that they need an evidence of that. So if one is saying you are a spouse, if one is saying I'm a civil partner, not the spouse but the civil partner, then they still need supporting documentation on that. Now there are a few notable differences between marriage and civil partnership. Marriage is formed by vows, or could be in presence of witnesses or in a church, whereas civil partnership is formed by signing the civil partnership document, and marriages could end by divorce. And but civil partnerships could end by dissolution because it was a legal injunction, so they can actually dissolve that and everyone would go their own ways. Although the process is fundamentally the same, civil partnership is a legal agreement, whereas marriage is how the community recognizes committed and loving relationships. So either ways, either one is a civil partner or either one is the correct spouse by marriage, then they have rights to join the other partner in Ireland. Now, as a civil partner or as a spouse, what do you need? What evidence do you need to provide? You need your marriage certificate or your civil partnership certificate. Marriage or civil partnerships must be capable of recognition under Irish law for other purposes outside of the immigration system. So the proof you need is marriage certificate, or if it's a civil partner, is the civil partnership certificate. Now, I want you to understand, especially for Africans, if I'm using Nigeria as an example because I'm a Nigerian, obviously, and there are different kinds of certificates, marriage certificates, so not all of them are acceptable for visa purposes. For example, if you're a nurse, when you were processing your NMP application, you use the marriage certificate. You could use the LG one, the local government one. Maybe that was the one that your church gave you when you were getting married, and that has the federal government logo, or it says LG. So that is still not acceptable for visa. This is a sample of a church one. If you're seeing that on your screen, that is an example of a church certificate or any other versions of that. That is not acceptable for visa purposes, so your spouse can't actually use that. Then this is another thing you need. This is another one that you need to consider. So this one is the one that is acceptable. There are some versions that bears FCT from registry as well that is acceptable. So if you don't have the one for visa, you and your spouse can go to the local government and tell them that you need the marriage certificate for visa purposes. Another thing that you need to consider is that this marriage certificate has embedded code in that. It has embedded code, like by virtue of the watermarks. They can verify that at the embassy and know if it's authentic or not. That is the purpose why they are using the verified versions. So it depends on the one you have. If you have the one from the registry that bears the federal government logo, not the one from the church, there is another version of this from LG that is white and half of this paper basically, but that is not the one for visa. So when you get to the local government and tell them you need the marriage certificate for international purposes, they can give you that, but you have to pay for that anyway, and they have to backdate it. They have to backdate it to the date of your marriage, the original date of your marriage. Sometimes you might have to pay extra charges for the penalty for that. So but you need to get the one before you make the move so that they can sign for you as well. You need to get that one, because if you got married previously and then you are getting a new marriage certificate that is bearing a recent date, that might actually be an issue when your spouse wants to join you, because you would have to provide more evidences that your relationship is trusted, is committed, and it's beyond internet. So you have to prove that. So make sure you get the correct one before your family joins you in the country, in Ireland, because you don't want to get a shock that they are requesting for supporting documentation simply because of the marriage certificates that you provided. Then another thing you need to know is that if your sponsor in Ireland, like your spouse or civil partner, has been residing in Ireland before you got married, maybe the person moved in as a single and then had to travel back home to get married, and since that time you haven't been issued an Irish joint family visa since your marriage. So now your spouse wants to join you in the country, so you need additional documentation. You must provide a full account of your relationship history. So what they mean by that is that after giving your letter of application, letter of invitation, you have explained your relationship and everything, then you need to provide other evidences, because if the marriage is recent and you didn't get married before, the visa officer might think that the other partner just wants to cross. That was why they quickly got married to you, or there is more to the relationship. That's why you need to prove. So you need to get the relationship history, where and when you met, evidenced by your visas, entry, exit, and stamps on the passport of your spouse, photographs. You need photographs, family photos, you and your spouse when you took them together. Maybe you went for several occasions and those things, and you have supporting documents for that, or supporting photographs. You can even date them and mention that these photos were taken at so and these photos were taken at so. So correspondence by email, like if you've been sending messages to each other by email, or you've been sending money to each other, you need evidences of those things. Or telephone conversations, you can print out the chats from where it started. You can print that, you can get your chat transcript either on WhatsApp or on Telegram. You need evidences that the relationship didn't just develop. So they might look into that if your marriage is very recent, or you didn't get married before coming into the country, and then suddenly maybe your spouse wants to join. They might need more evidence from you. So you need to provide a full account of your relationship history. Maybe, for example, you've gone to several places together, you traveled by bus, you traveled by car, or you traveled by airplane. If you have the evidences, then you can provide them as well. Or so you can also provide that. Then on spouse and civil partners too, your relationship must include several face-to-face meetings, excluding webcam anyway, between the parties. That's especially if your marriage is recent. It's not sufficient for a relationship to have developed solely over the internet or by telephone or SMS for immigration purposes. So they won't accept that. So you really need evidences that you've been communicating. They need all the chat transcripts. The visa officer would evaluate that as well. Then another thing that you need to know is, if you have children, if you have kids under 18 and they are not married, is either you get their birth certificate or adoption order. So in the case of a child that is from a previous marriage or relationship and the spouse is no longer with you or something like that, you need evidence that you have been given full custody, because if the child is under 18, they believe that that child can't make decisions by himself or herself. So it's either that child wants to follow the father or wants to follow the dad, the mother. So either ways, if you are still married with the spouse, you need the birth certificate of those kids. If not, you might need adoption order, or evidence that you've been a legal evidence from the law court that you have custody and full rights to take care of those kids. So you need that as an evidence as well. So where the other parent has some custody or access rights, an affidavit by that parent consenting to the child being removed from their home country is necessary. So if, for example, if you have a custody of your child and the other spouse is no longer with you, but you've been taking care of this child for a while, or the other spouse is aware of that, what they need to do is to write an affidavit, swear an affidavit that's in a law court under Commissioner for Oaths. Get an affidavit and say that they give full consent that you can relocate that child to another country. Otherwise, you need the consent of both, and you need the birth certificates, or the spouse, the father of the children or the mother of the children needs to be traveling with them at that point in time. Then you need evidence of finances. Now you have to show that the finances of yourself and that of your sponsor meets the minimum level of earnings required. So you have to show that it meets the minimum level of earning required. What you need to know is that you need your detailed statement of bank account covering a 6-month period prior to your application. That is yours. That is for you as a person. That is for you as a person. So you need your bank statements. You need your bank statements covering a 6-month period prior to your application. So you need that as well. Then another thing you need to consider is that you need your detailed, I'll show you now in a second, statement of your sponsor's bank account. So statement of your sponsor's bank account, you need that, covering a 6-month period immediately prior to your application. For example, if your sponsor hasn't stayed longer than 3 months in the country, and then because for nurses most especially, they have to force you, as a nurse, you have to first finish your registration with NMBI. So because if you are coming into the country, mostly you are under employer sponsorship, and if your employer sponsors you either to take adaptation or to take the aptitude test, you can do that immediately and resume the next day, because immediately you get registered after you have passed successfully, then your employer is going to apply for the critical skills for you. Currently, I think the processing time is 2 to 3 weeks on critical skills, and then sometimes it could take longer if you haven't finished your registration on time. So when that is sorted, that document, then you begin to prepare the other document that your family can use to move you into the country. In such cases that you haven't stayed for up to 3 months, for example, and you want to move your family to join you, and part of the requirement is saying that you need a bank statement that is covering a 6-month period to send to the person you are bringing into the country. So you can use whatever you have. You can use a current bank statement in Ireland. You can use another one from back home as an evidence if you still have a local bank account anyway. So you can also use that. If you still have a local bank account, you can use that as well. And another thing is, they will need to see an evidence of projected earnings. That is projected earnings. That's where they calculate your contract, and they know that even after today, you're still going to receive your salary. At the end of the month, you're still going to receive your salary subsequently in upcoming months. So they won't really dwell on that when they see the evidence of the contract. Now, for a sponsor who is residing in Ireland, which because that is going to be the case, they need evidence that they meet the minimum level of earnings required. So not just any kind of job can just use the joint family visa. Definitely, as doctors, as nurses, as carers, you can do that. You meet the minimum level of earnings as required. So you need your employment details. That's the summary from revenue. Revenue is the government body that deals with tax payment, that deals with paying salaries, that deals with everything related to payment, employer payment, especially if you're working with a government and stuff like that. So when you log into your account, because when you resume work, you will have to register with revenue for details on tax and stuff like that. So when you register on their website, you have access to your account, so you can print out your summary, employment summary. You can print that out from the revenue page, and when you print that for the 3 years immediately prior to, so if you are just joining the country, that is not really applicable to you. They would consider other things as well. So you need to print that out. Then you need 3 consecutive pay slips. You need pay slips from your employer. If you can provide the full 3, then definitely you need your evidence of contract, and maybe a backup letter from your employer that they are going to be paying you, that you're working with them, and other stuff like that. So revenue letter for the 3 years immediately prior, because when you print that out, the 3 years immediately prior is going to be blank. It's only the report on that is going to be blank. They are not going to dwell on it anyway, but you still have to print it out from revenue, just to show that how long you've been in the country and when exactly you resume that job anyway. So for your sponsor that is resident in Ireland, still, if the person is self-employed and the person is not working for the government or HSE or for any private institution, they must submit notice of assessment of income from self-employment for the last 3 most recent years. It could be in another country, it could be in another location, but yet they need an evidence that the evidence that a government official has been assessing their income and they are not in any way evading tax. So evidence of earnings in the period since the most recent tax was filed. So it's another way to discover people that are really trying to run away from the government anyway. Now, another thing is on eligibility. Still, if you haven't watched the part 1 of this series, then you can go back to that and watch so you can understand who is eligible to move their family immediately and who is not eligible, and those who are eligible to move their families after 1 year of stay in the country. So you need to understand that as well. Now, another thing is that you need your evidence of projected earnings. That's if you can't meet up with the pay slips thing, or you can't meet up with revenue, the report from revenue for the last 3 years, or other things. So you need projected earnings. So that's when your contract comes in. Make sure that everything you are submitting is original, and then there's going to be 2 extra photocopies for everything you submit, that your spouse submits at the local embassy anyway. Then another thing is, after 12 months, people that are eligible to sponsor their family, to move their family into the country, they need an evidence of P60s. It's a tax document that is also gotten from my revenue for the previous 2 years or previous 1 year if they have been in the country for only 1 year. So that is what they need. Another thing is people that are self-employed, they also must provide aside notices of assessment, they must provide 3 recent consecutive pay slips as well. They must provide that, or any other documentation that relates to payments if they have one. Then for employment holders that they are entitled, that is a general employment permit, not the critical skills, because critical skills permit holders, they can move their family immediately into the country, but the general employment permit holders, they can move their family after 12 months of staying in the country. So they need their evidence of contract as well, from the proposed date of entry, and that shows their annual salary. So they need that as an evidence to submit. They have to send those original documents to their family member that is coming to join them. Evidence of dependency also varies from people to people. So if someone is making an application and is basing everything on the fact that is that sponsor that is going to provide everything, or that is going to pay for the flights, that is going to do this, do that. So they need documentary evidence, more evidence. They need things as proofs. They want to see proofs. They want to see your own bank statements, just to confirm that this person that is your sponsor, as you are really dependent on the person has been sending money to you frequently. They want to see everything. So your bank statement, your sponsor's bank statement, copies of everything, and transactions between you, evidences of chats, transcripts, and photographs as much as possible. So you need to understand that. Then if you have any other source of income, for example, you are joining your family but you've been working in your own home country, this is where you also need to print your own pay slips from your employer. Print your pay slips, last 3 pay slips. Print your bank statements. You need to go to the bank. It has to be original color, not the one you print from the internet. Let them know that you need that for visa purposes. If you haven't been working and you are not eligible, or you are unable to work for whatever reason, you need to explain that, because they want to know that you are not going to come into the country and cause additional strain on the government funds, that maybe you'll be falling sick every time and they have to keep paying you and stuff like that, or they have to keep paying you unemployment benefits and other things like that. So they really need to know if you are not working. They want to know why you are not working, and other things. Then your living costs. So your living cost, this is where you provide evidence of your house rent. If you've been paying rent if you are paying mortgage at home, in your home back in Nigeria or in your country, you need to provide that evidence of utility, of gas. If you're paying for electricity, all the reports from that clearly shows your full name and your address, then you need to provide that as well. Or other evidence is maybe you're paying medical bills, or you are currently in school that you are making other payment. They want to consider that as well, because they would evaluate those things with your bank statement and with the bank statement of your sponsor, if you can actually afford living in the country. So they would evaluate that. So, or maybe eventually when you come into the country, you're going to be reliant on government funds, so they want to know that as well. So make sure that evidence of rent, let it bear your name and your address as it is on your application details. If you have details of any other family members in the country of residence, you can give it as well. In this case, they want to determine if you will, maybe after your visa permission has finished, you're still going to remain in the country. They want to know that you have people back home that you are looking forward to going back to, and you're not going to remain in the country if you've overstayed in the country. So that is the basis of that. If you have details of any other family members, you need to provide it and mention that. You can provide that in your letter of application as well. Or if you have parents, you can provide their pictures. If you have siblings, you can provide their pictures, or another handwritten letter just to back it up, to explain that this is what you have provided. So if you have a medical condition, you need to make note that as well. Or if the kids traveling with you have any medical condition, that needs to be known as well. So they need evidences of active and continuous involvement in your life of that sponsor. So you can't just say you are bringing some, because joint family is something, it's a tough, there are tough policies around that. So under joint family, long stay, so you can't just bring someone that doesn't have any relationship with you in the past, or someone you met over the internet and you've just been communicating over 1 month, and then you want to use your influence, you want to use your power, your document to bring that person. So it's not going to be acceptable unless you provide evidences of previous communications. So on medical or travel insurance, what you need to do is, it's always better to get it ready anyway. There's an additional cost for that. If you are staying for 2 years, then you need travel insurance that covers 2 years. They are going to issue you 2 certificates. So one is going to cover your first year and the other one is going to cover your second year. So you need a medical or travel insurance. Most times they don't really, visa officers, they don't really request for that. But at immigration, maybe before boarding the plane or after boarding the plane, my request for that, where is your travel insurance? So you need to really get it ready. Some people would use maybe leadway insurance. You can even get that over online. If you make the application online, they can send that to you via email or by post. But most times at visa offices, you would see travel insurance agents outside those visa centers. Not sure if not really sure if they're authentic anyway, but if you want the authentic ones, you can go on travel insurance website, the official website, and then you can make your applications and get it ready. They would need the travel location, the address you're going to, the start date, how long you are going to stay. So but on your long stay visa or single entry, that doesn't mean that you are when your permission expires, because you still need to register with immigration when you come into the country. When your permission expires, it's not like you're going to be sent back home, but they will you will have to renew your permission. That is what that implies anyway. So if your visa is approved, you must have the evidence of medical or travel insurance when you arrive at the port of entry, and must present that to the immigration officer on request. So you can include that with your visa applications, because some visa officers would overlook that. But if you don't want to take chances, then you need that as well. So if you've had visa refusals in the past for any country, maybe you were trying to go into the UK and the visa got rejected or refused for whatever reason, then you need to provide that as well. The original letter issued to you by the authorities of that country, then when that visa was refused, and the reason, stating the reasons clearly, you need to provide that original letter with your applications as well. So if not disclosing any previous visa refusals will result in that application being refused, and one could actually get a ban. So if a child under the age of 18 is traveling with your spouse or with your family member, then you need their birth certificate with that application. That needs to be submitted as well for every child that is going with your spouse. So they need to present certificates of birth for that. Then letter of consent is very, very important. I'm going to explain this when I'm talking about the drafting of letters. So you can see my sample. So letter of consent, for example, maybe I'm a mom and my kids are back home in Nigeria, and my spouse is going to bring them over into the country because I'm not with them and those kids are under 18 years of age. I also need to write a letter of consent that I'm authorizing my spouse to bring those kids. So it's not like just one partner is eloping with kids and they don't know where they're going, so they want to see a letter of consent as well. This is different from your invitation letter. Sometimes if you put it, some visa officers could still overlook that, but definitely you need a letter of consent or a statement of consent if they are traveling either alone or with a person or other than their parent or legal guidance. Then you need a written letter of consent. Just if they are going to be traveling with someone else, then both parents need to write the consent letter, different ones for each child. So it's not going to be like you're writing it for only one person. So that's only if they are below 18 years of age anyway. Those signed consents must be accompanied by copies of the consenting parent's passport or legal guardian's passport or their national identity card, something that shows their signature and their full names anyway. So if that child is traveling with one parent or legal guardian, so the consent of the other parent is required. That signed consent must be accompanied by a copy of their consenting parent or the passport. So I've already explained earlier on, the spouse sponsoring the other partner needs to send all documents in original by post to the other partner, so that they can use that for application. In case of court order, like where one parent has a sole custody of a child, so the child on the court order must be submitted, because just to keep them safe, just to say that this is a legal injunction that this parent has a sole custody and there is no other consent required from anyone else. So the parents can really travel with that kid anywhere and no one would hold him or her responsible. So when you are returning the documents, make sure that all documents and the accompanying application summary signed must be original. Make sure that they are originals, and you also have photocopies. That's 2 copies of each of the document. If you are submitting your previous passport, for example the ones that have expired, you need to photocopy all the pages of those passports by 2. You need to photocopy everything that you are doing. Original documents such as marriage certificate, birth certificate, death certificate, or whatever document will be returned to you. Definitely they will be returned to you, but you will need to list them, the documents that are original that you want them to return. Another thing is, now this is new practice, documents that are official needs to be notarized, like birth certificates, like marriage certificates, any certificates whatsoever, official documents. divorce certificate, death certificate, maybe of family members that were issued outside the European Union, and the only acceptable notary officer for this, for visa purposes, it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in any country. So if you're in Nigeria, for example, those documents that I've just mentioned, that is new practice, because if you don't do them, they would send that back. And that might cause delays with your application. Ministry of Foreign Affairs only, they need to notarize those documents and confirm that they are originals. And in Nigeria currently, they have to, well, there is an office in Lagos, which is Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos, Nigeria. Some people even say that that office is just an annex, it's not the real office, but definitely the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nigeria is in Abuja. If you have someone, family members over that side, maybe your friends, you can courier your documents to them, originals and the photocopy, and they can help you to do that and send it back to you. Or you should go in person. People that did that recently said they spent like maybe 20k less. It should have been more now, because as at that time things have really changed. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in Abuja office in Nigeria. So you need to know that birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificates, and everything, they need to be attested by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in that country that they are true copies, they are originals. All the originals need to be attested. Then decision, make sure that you apply online for a visa. When you have completed that online application process, you must follow the instructions on the summary application form that is created by the online system. So that form is going to contain information where you can submit your documentation. It's going to be the visa office that is close to you. Make sure you print, sign and date the summary form and submit that with your supporting documentation. And you may be required, definitely you're going to be required to provide your biometrics information. That is when you need to book an appointment. So after doing this online, filling the online application form, you can't just walk into the visa office the next day after collating all your documents. You need to book an appointment online as well, like I mentioned during the part 1, and I mentioned that website as well. So you need to visit that site and book your appointment. And if your kids are traveling, then they also need their separate appointment. So one appointment can't cover 3 family members, maybe a dad and 2 kids. They need their own appointment as well. So submit all photocopies of all documents, including every page of your passport. Ensure you separate original documents from photocopy document. So originals are going to be arranged in a separate place. Photocopies are going to be 2 photocopies. One is going to be arranged separately, the other is going to be arranged separately as well. So application decisions and original documentation will be returned to you. So definitely you are paying for a prepaid envelope along with your application, and that envelope, you can get that at the VFS office processing your application. Fingerprints are taken for applicants aged 6 years and over. That's on the appointment date. You need to know that as well. And the VFS office, they know that VFS is just an agency, so they need to send your application to the embassy in Abuja so they can process that as well. And that's where visas are processed and decisions are made whether to issue your visa, and then they will send that back by courier to you. So on child's applications, the child's parent or the guardian should be present when the child's fingerprints are taken. And if the parent can't be present for whatever reason, then VFS office needs to be informed so that they can provide other over the phone instructions. Note that if you are providing evidences of accounts, of income, or of things you're doing currently in your home country, microfinance statements are not acceptable. Mortgage statements are not acceptable. Statements from thrift and saving societies are not acceptable. So you need original bank statements like savings, current accounts. Those are the things you need. No microfinance, no thrift. They won't be accepted, so that your visa is not delayed. You need to note that as well. Make sure that application is complete, and the visa office may definitely request for extra documentation or information if anything is missing. And applications can be refused if documents are incomplete, if documents are not translated correctly, if translated documents or official certificates are not attested, if they are not attested by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the visa office if they can't verify any information supplied, maybe they can't contact your bank to to ask them to check with them if the bank statement you provided was original, then definitely that application might be refused. Make sure you don't include a false or misleading information or documents in your application. That application might be refused if you do anything like that. In some instances, if there were really evidences of fraudulent practices, people may not be allowed to appeal the visa decision, and they may actually be blocked from getting an Irish visa for 5 good years. Now, thank you so much for listening to this, and just to let you know, more to come. I still have part 3, 4 and 5. Part 3 is going to talk about getting the correct photographs for joint family visa so you don't make any mistakes. Part 4 is going to talk about how to draft your letters correctly. For example, letter of invitation, letter of consent, and letter of application. So that letter of invitation is going to be from your sponsor, letter of application is going to be from the family member that is joining the other spouse in the country, and letter of consent for the parent to consent that they allow the child to travel. Then part 5 is going to talk about the application checklist, order of organization of documents for submission, and what they need to do, what your spouse and the family member need to do when they arrive in Ireland. So thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Don't forget to give a like, give a subscribe to this, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss the next update. Thank you so much.